Starting lineup, Yorick, Volibear, Kassadin, Jinx, Tom, up against Cassante, Darius, Vigar, Fortune, Swain. Rating of the picks for a lower ranked game, Yorick as a top, 10. Volibear in the jungle, 7. Kassadin as a mid, 5. Tom in support, 10. Cassante as a top, 8. Darius in the jungle, 5. Vigar as a mid, 7. Fortune as a shooter, 7. Swain in support, 9. Here in this game, a collection of players with a lot of money spent on skins and on cosmetics. Some of these players will legitimately be into their character. Others will just use this type of game as an opportunity to test things out. And others still really seem to have gotten the cosmetics to feel better about themselves more than anything. We have this matchup between an ordinary Jinx and the Captain Fortune, with a massive disparity in the outcome here, which will end up weighing heavily on the outcome of this game. We're gonna have both these junglers being very vocal in this game, which is something that could easily end up causing trouble down the line. We are taking things a bit slower this week. I'm working on resolving some trouble with a Slovakian counterpart, and I'm trying to look for some clarity so that we do not run into obstacles down the line. Moving on. This game revolved all around a good kind of nervousness. I held back all the time, and that will result in a very efficient KDA, not giving any money up to the enemy team. But simultaneously, you get this extremely slow start because I'm never willing to go all in. The translation in practice is that you get this phenomenon which is fine on this difficulty level, which is playing with the nobodies, revolving around depriving the ADC of any kind of cash. I didn't feel any kind of anger toward the support player. I don't think that there was anything malicious going on. If you ever have any kind of success, it is something that you will have to stop doing, because we do not funnel all the money to Tom in any kind of serious game or any kind of serious setup. Because he can't grow as well as Jinx can grow, because he is not an attack damage carry. I held back and it saved my life. I held back and it cost me a kill. That is all over this matchup. You see your abyssal dive all over this clip. Tom Kench leaps to a target location, damaging enemies in the area effect on arrival. Abyssal dive is a gap closing tool, and it brings extra crowd control. Typically used to roam or engage. You compare that up with Devour or with Tongue Lash and you get a deadly combo. People who have watched other videos on the channel will know that I'm a massive Tom fan. He's one of my favorite champions in the video game, and he is one of the best beginner champions. He's incredibly easy to play, and he can almost not die. It is a 10 out of 10 pick. Here in this clip, right after Tom claimed all of the kills in the bottom lane with the early push, Fortune and Swain are going to be hesitant to engage. As a consequence, I will start roaming, so I'm going to use the summoner spell to teleport to the mid lane. Mid laners are typically very hesitant to work with anybody or give anything up, and so this mid laner is not going to help me out. I end up going back to the base and then just using the ult and then getting the kill that way. We have some pretty disappointing top lane play on the blue team side from this Yorick. The blue team is going to get the second Drake, and this Volibear player is going to be quite loud about it. And every time I see something like that, as a person who spent 90% of his games as a jungler, my gut feeling is, Volibear guy, jungling is not for you. If you get this loud and this hysterical over one Drake, then you're probably going to end up becoming very frustrated with jungling over time. I never behaved that way. It is going to become incredibly draining for you emotionally if you are so invested in the ping system over one Drake. We're gonna have the Swain player in this game with mediocre item choices and spending pretty much the entire game being unaware that he's going to have to solo everything. This Fortune player was the worst player in this game. Up top, as we will see later on, this Cassante player was an individual who was continuously frustrated and was playing with a lot of anger in a bad way, and will end up making a bunch of dumb decisions throughout this game. This mid-mage on our side, kind of sour all the time, using the ultimate because he's not really willing to cooperate. It's kind of weak and something that I would never have the audacity to do myself, to deliberately not go in when an ally comes over, so as to make sure that the ally cannot get the kill. The super mega death rocket, the further the travel distance, the higher the damage. It deals physical damage and has a very slight knockback. It has an AoE and it can hit multiple enemies. The super mega death rocket can travel up to 1,500 units, which is more than enough to hit targets at the other side of the map. The ultimate is perfect for finishing off enemies who are low health and trying to escape. Playing with Jinx on the map means that she's going to be kill stealing, and if you struggle to embrace that, then you're going to have a very rough time because it is part of her core mechanics. Volibear is going to try to set up an ambush here. The rest is not responding. We have Yorick coming in too late. And this Kassadin ends up helping out. He's going to be pushed down river. Velgar is trying to escape, but it's not a rational kind of escape. There's really nowhere to run here, and Kassadin is going to be able to chase him down successfully. Kassadin using a lot of his summoner spells here. The Kassadin passive of Void Stone, you take 20% less magic damage. That makes your situation as Veigar even more ridiculous here. And this Kassadin player is going to try to hit hard with his Force Pulse, his third spell. It's an AoE, the damage goes up as he uses his abilities. The Force Pulse spell stores up charges, and every time the damage increases, it goes up to 6. Kassadin, really an endgame champion. Especially past level 16, where he can max out Riftwalk, his ultimate. Kassadin can be a game-changing carry in the late game. Going to start out with some interaction between this Kassadin and Velgar. You see a lot of that passive again, and a lot of that mobility. We end up with what is probably at 15 minutes to 16 minutes in, the best play of the game. we have this red team top pushing the incompetent blue team back, I'm going to end up teleporting. It ends up being completely dysfunctional yet again. I end up having to run all the way back. But what you see here now is something that experience has taught me over time. And we're going to end up getting a double kill here in this Swain and this Fortune. I get the first one with Zap and I end up getting the second one using Switcheroo. And really, as beautiful an example as you will find of how, as you will always see in a Worlds game, etc., continuously moving everybody around and not sticking to your lane permanently comes with a whole array of qualities in which much of the mystery of League of Legends and MOBAs in general really lies. A lot of the magic of League of Legends really happens the moment that players start roaming. That is where the big game-defining plays are made. In this particular case, you have this clear disadvantage of number 1, nobody in the top lane wants to work with me. Number 2, my shot is nervous and poor. Number 3, I end up wasting a whole bunch of time running back. However, despite all of that, because of the general map movements, my leaving causes Swain and Fortune to overreach. They overstep, they go in too deep, and they end up stuck in a rat trap. And you will typically see that in this, further expanding on the analogy with the game of basketball, we already obviously have the 5-on-5, we already have the 3-point shooter in a Jinx or a Fortune or a Caitlyn that creates the threat to which the enemy team has to respond. And here now too you get an even greater analogy with the game of basketball, which is that you will find that a bunch of frustrated losers playing swift play at the lowest possible level will never ever move or switch lanes. They will never ever roam. When I started playing at the lowest possible level, I vividly remember especially a collection of French individuals who were always very, very angry and frustrated whenever I would look for kills for a moment or roam for a moment. All the way on the other end of the spectrum we have faker teams where obviously all that ever happens is roaming and people never ever stick to a fixed pattern. And the key, of course, is to do that without really giving up stuff. You don't want to completely abandon your lane in such a way that you give up your duties or that you give up your responsibilities. But again, just like Golden State under Steph Curry will continuously move the ball, league teams under Faker will continuously move players to other lanes and continuously be roaming. This is where the magic happens. We may be poor at this, we may be very bad at this may be beyond our capacity and beyond what we can skillfully do. Perhaps we are not good enough for this, but there is no question in my mind that once you have the basic requirements fulfilled, such as understanding the gold balance, understanding your spells, and understanding itemization, if you move past that, one of the first winning things that will make the difference in a bronze or a silver game especially will be this kind of map movement. And here you have almost instantly this Miss Lucille Yorick player holding it against me. And very clearly also this Volibear player behaving in a manner that says WTF is up, what is this guy doing here? Which you will frequently find, like we found it in this Kassadin, we found it in Yorick, and we found it in Volibear. These were all, from what I can tell on their profile, very young people. The only person who was okay with roaming in this game was this Tom Kench player. And so that is already a way in which this will get punished. But I've noticed previously that, not per se by me, but in general by players on my side, we have turned some games around, and we have been able to turn some losses into victories by roaming the correct way, and by moving to other lanes so as to confuse the enemy team. And I would have never been able to get that double kill, ironically enough, if I had not completely missed in the top lane. The key words in this game were really avoiding mistakes, so I'm not going to get too greedy here more than anything. This is all kind of knowing your audience. You give up 3 kills to this Kassadin player. If the roles were reversed, there is no way that this Kassadin would swallow it, and there would be undoubtedly a fuss. End up taking down the first top lane turret myself at about 20 minutes in, because this Yorick player was the weak link. We end up eventually taking down Atakan, and we are not going to get a very interesting buff from him on this occasion. If I had to describe all these players in a personal way, as is my video style, in a couple of words or one word, I would say this Yorick was angry and without much skill. This Volibear was elitist but without the skill. This Kassadin was elitist with skill. This Tom was an all-around good player. This K'Sante was frustrated, angry, and reactive. This Darius was frustrated, angry, and reactive. This Vigar player was unskilled and calm. This Fortune player had 0 skill, but was calm and nihilistic. This Swain player was a good player who ended up eating the loss for no reason. More specifically, let's have a look at these individuals. As far as items and specifics is concerned, this Yorick at 2 and 6, mostly built like an assassin. It's just a kind of cycle of self-harm, and you have no real place in ranked league with this kind of attitude. It's very difficult to believe that you've ever had any success with assassin items on Yorick, yet you go that way anyway. It's very difficult to believe that you've ever had massive victories with Yorick, yet you got him every kind of skin, cosmetic, and everything anyway. It's very difficult to believe that on a personal level, as Miss Lucille, you were really deeply attracted to Yorick, yet you got him anyway, most likely as a kind of cheap way to secure victories rather than actually because you like the character. Because Yorick is frequently seen as a kind of almost cheating champion because of the mistress or the lady or whatever you want to call him. In other words, you have settled on a bunch of things where we can say coincidence after coincidence after coincidence stack up, and none of these things seem to work out, and yet you keep on pushing on anyway. Which, when that happens for everything and with everything, you get a very clear picture of a person who is ultra stubborn, unwilling to change. And for no reason whatsoever, because you're not even being successful with what you're doing. We have this Volibear player, and it is much the same situation as with this Yorick. You got a bunch of cosmetics for this Volibear, and this is really your first time on him. You went with a bunch of mage items, all out offensive. You ended up going 6-3. This is a typical example of being entirely reliant on the base stats. And with this kind of stubbornness in build pattern, it is very likely that you've been miserable on other champions. Quite frankly put, both you and the Yorick player, without any exaggeration, not trying to be rude, not coming after you, but if we're going to make any kind of analysis, we would have to say that this is a build that could be put together by anybody who signed up for the game and joined it 5 seconds into the game, without any kind of experience or any kind of knowledge about anything. One guy just clicked on the mage tab and the other guy just clicked on the assassin tab and got a bunch of junk that really, in many ways, does not fit at all. Both people seem to show frustration, and so there's that typical pattern about, again, being very stubborn and then taking it out on other people. We have this Kassadin player going 14-6 with a lot of involvement. You did have an extremely chauvinist attitude and essentially demanded of other people that they suicide themselves for you. You were definitely the most chauvinist player on Team Blue. But you had a great understanding of your character. And you seem to be a winning player. You went with a bunch of hyper-aggressive mage items, which is very hard to do and to pull off. There's no doubt in my mind that you're currently going too offensive. If I read this correctly, it's Void Staff, Lich Bane, Malignance, and then spending an obscene amount of money on boots. That is making it as hard on yourself as possible. But by itself, you were a very serious person and you largely pulled it off. We have this Tom, you went 6-1 and 11. Really spending way too much money on boots. You also went with Heartsteel. A winning player, winning attitude, you didn't complain. Probably the best player on Team Blue alongside myself. We have myself, I went 8-1-7. I got the Collector, Kanik, and Boots of Swiftness. I was kind of nervous in this game and kind of jittery, which meant that I was able to pull out fast enough, but then at the same time I pulled out frequently a little bit too quick to get a solid kill. Definitely, with a bunch of older players or more serious players, these issues would quickly be resolved, because I would not have to worry in such groups that they would try to take the bread out of the mouth of the ADC, which is a dysfunctional thing to do by itself, and a lot of what this game revolved around. We have this Cassante player going 6-5, Unending Despair, Iceborne Gauntlet, and Jack Show. By itself, definitely not bad items. Definitely played with a lot of bad rage at the end. It's a little bit justified that he ended up getting angry. We have this Darius player with, South Park and atheism really did a number on children, and That's all you can say of these individuals. It's just, I can't even pronounce your name, because if I do, the video will inherently be kept out of recommendation lists and forwarding lists and similar videos lists by way of the YouTube algorithm. You went 5 and 10, you got Yomu, and you got Boots of Swiftness, and you got Syrax, and you got Dead Man's Plate. So that essentially means that 3 out of the 4 items that you got revolved purely and entirely around movement speed alone. This was a very vocal player, and essentially a team wrecker. In due time, this Darius player and this Volibear player end up wrecking teams. Because they're both very vocal, they're both very loud, and they make very, very questionable decisions, and they have that in them that inherently they put all the responsibility with other people for their own decision making. And that is a very bad thing for a team down the line. With this Yorick player, for instance, you get a lot of silence and you get a lot of modesty, so even though they have no skill and even though they seem to be angry, it doesn't do much harm. This Kassadin player, for instance, was looking for a bunch of beef and a bunch of trouble, but if you have enough skill, that doesn't per se mean that it's bad. It all depends on the context. We have this Vygar player going 2 and 9. That has everything to do with your matchup here. This Kassadin player knew what he was doing. You're going all out offensive, and that's dumb. When you take that many deaths, you should build defensive stuff, obviously, to avoid more deaths. You also went with the top hat again, of which the name escapes me, that gives you a percentage bonus. You shouldn't do that because that percentage bonus is calibrated upon your total AP. You should only get that item when you're already all the way at the end of your build, so that you multiply the total amount of AP and not a small amount. We have this Fortune player going 1 and 6. Fortune can be deceptively difficult to play, as I've already said a couple of times. Shooter in general is not that easy, to put it mildly. You went Collector and Infinity, you got free boots, and then you went Noon Quiver. You could have really done worse. You could have really done worse. Most definitely, most Fortune builds are more ridiculous than that. Those are not bad items. Needless to say, I would have gone more tanky. And the Collector and Infinity Edge are much of the same thing. They kind of offer a bit too little variety, but other than that, those are really solid. Most of the time, I would have to complain that people didn't put enough money toward the Collector and Infinity. The Collector and Infinity for these types of champions are some of my favorite items in the game, most definitely. We have this Swain player going 3 and 6. That is definitely more because of the circumstances than because of the actual player skill. You went, amongst other things, Leandry, and you also got a support item. Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I myself am quite hesitant to play support positions. It's like, one thing is, it's a very noble thing to do, and in one sense, if you're lucky with your teams, it can really have a dramatically good impact on your win-loss ratio, and it's probably one of the best ways to rank up. However, paradoxically, at the same time, if you are not so lucky with your team, which is what was going on with Rafal Stark here, playing Swain, in support slot, there is really only so much you can do, and this poor Swain player really just got dragged down by everybody else. For different reasons, but in retrospect, we would definitely have to say this Yorick, this Fortune, and this Darius were joke mode players. And they have to go back to the basics. And they currently are just dragging everybody else down in ranked. A thing that was very much going on in this game, and that really defined it, was that a lot of these individuals had very fixated IDs in advance. Instead of trial and error type of mindset and continuous readjustment, these players really made up their mind up front and then insisted on executing it exactly the way they had imagined, which is a very difficult and rigid and stiff mindset to have. At the end of the day, I think a battle of not being nihilistic versus being nihilistic. You have the red team here with a quite nihilistic attitude, especially in this Darius and this Fortune. Names do tell you a lot frequently, more than most people would have you believe. And even though you have a bunch of flaws on Team Blue, at the very least, they care about themselves, and they care about improving themselves, and they care about their own standing, and that ended up being better than the kind of masochism that you had on Team Red in this game. Taking a look at the scoreboard here, Yorick player, lots of skins, lots of little extra purchases, lots of Eternals and everything. We've seen a bunch of these Yi players, a bunch of these Fortune players, some Dragon Lady players, and they don't understand the basics of their character and they're completely stuck in the lowest possible tier. This is 2, 6, and 3 here on a winning team full of winning players, which is a great difference because it is much harder to have a good KDA when your team is miserably failing. If everything's collapsing everywhere and you have a great KDA, then you are a god player. It's much harder to do. By contrast, vice versa, it goes the other way as well. When you are on a winning team full of winning players and you're doing horribly, that usually means that you're awful. So we have here this woman who's deeply attracted to Yorick, which, you know. We have here Cyrilda, we have Mercury, we have Trinity, we have Eclipse, and we have Winged Moonplate. Let's go over this. Let's pick out the easy ones first. Why does Eclipse not work? Eclipse is one of the worst items in the game, and it is the most overused item in the entire video game. It costs nearly 3,000 gold. As much as I constantly make fun of people slapping the Ruined King onto everything, I suppose really that the Ruined King is a great thing when you compare it to Eclipse on the average champ. If you have to choose between Eclipse and the Ruined King on random champions, then it's the Ruined King 1,000 times over. One thing that happened to me on my personal journey throughout League so far, we're now like 5 months into my League experience, and one thing that's happened to me is I got introduced to the game by great German players who constantly used assassin items and ability cooldown items. And that led me to think, for the first 3 months that I was playing, that assassin items and ability cooldown items were amazing. I'm kind of slowly coming off of that because I'm slowly coming to the realization that the reason why those players were so amazing was because of the fact that they had amazing skill. It turns out that on many champs, actually assassin items are not that great at all, which means that I'm slowly throwing some more love for the marksman tree. And that certainly goes for this kind of thing. In a nutshell, 60 attack damage is not that much. 15 ability haste is okay, but not for 2,900 gold. That ever-rising moon passive is one of the worst passives on any weapon of any kind. When you're playing Yorick, it will never trigger. So all in all, what do you get out of this? This is really mostly to get to 60 attack damage, and it is a horrible item to buy just for the attack damage. There are many things that you can get that will give you much better killing power for much less gold. Why is Ever Rising Moon horrible on Yorick? Because he has no spells that he will cast in such quick succession, so you will never have the shield from Eclipse. You will never trigger the passive. Why is the 15 ability haste not great? Ability haste could theoretically work on anyone, but Yorick is really not so much an ability haste guy. Yorick mostly thrives off of whittling people down. In many ways, Yorick is like the highly functional version of Nasus. It's mostly about coordinating with a mistress and being unkillable and putting a kind of Mundo-like fear in the enemy that you're just not going to go down, and essentially triggering that mind game. We have here Trinity, a Jax item. They recently, I believe, increased the attack damage from 33 to 36, which is pretty substantial considering everything. They may also have buffed other things slightly. I think they're slightly upping Trinity again after nerfing it. This is an item that is typically seen on Neko. This is an item that is typically seen on Jax. There is nothing that Yorick specifically does well when spamming his auto attack continuously or upping his attack speed. There is no reason to get this item. The ability haste is not really well spent because it's mostly about the lady or the mistress or whatever you want to call the thing, the main pet. Yorick doesn't get anything specifically from attack speed. It will cost you approximately 3,300 gold. It's an expensive item. Attacking grants 20 movement speed for 2 seconds. That does not really fit with Yorick's kit at all. We have here Mercury. Why does this not work? The reason why this doesn't work is because Mercury is one of the most overused items in the game and a very dumb purchase on almost any champ. You're now not only spending the 1,250 like you would approximately if you went with plated steel caps, but now you don't even have the plating passive. So now you're literally just throwing it at purely 20 magic resist, which is just, you can't do math. Like, if you're really doing that, if you're really going for that, then you struggle with math. We have Irkanic with me. It cost me 2,900. It gave me 400 health, 80 magic resist, 100% extra base health regeneration, and Mage Bane. Gain a magic shield after 15 seconds of not taking magic damage. And that cost me 2,900. This costs you 1,250 and it gave you 20 magic resist. What you have to kind of appreciate is that there is nothing really that pushes anybody into going with these assassin-like items, such as Trinity Force. There is no recommendation around that with Yorick. You're doing awful, you're doing horrible, and yet you just keep doing it anyway. It's kind of like a person who kept trying to eat their own shoes, and you just notice that nothing good came of it, but yet you just keep continuously eating your own shoes anyway, and you just keep going with it. There's a lot of that going on in society today. Moving on.
30 seconds until minions spawn.
She's such a loser. Always ready to cry. Ta-ta-ta-ta.
The void, is it? All monsters can be slain.
What if I had a gun that shot other guns?
Minions have spawned. An ally has been slain.
I'm crazy. Got a doctor's note. I don't even think once about blowing stuff up.
You have slain an enemy.
Hold on. I'm about to say something really cool. Jinx? Stands for Jinx. Durr.
Enemy has been slain.
Now where was it? Right. We can
An ally has been slain.
Who needs reasons? Whatever. Let's just start shooting. Ask me if I'm listening. Hint, I'm not.
An enemy has been slain. An ally has been slain. An enemy has been slain. Turret plating will soon fall.
I'm wearing lots of belts. For no reason. I'm trying to care.
Shut down. destroyed a turret.
Shot other guests.
Killing spree.
I'm crazy. Let's just play. Said no one ever. Don't tell my other guns. I'm crazy.
Your turret has been destroyed. An enemy has been slain.
Ah, come on. What's the worst that could happen?
Your turret has been destroyed. Godlike. Has destroyed a turret.
Whatever. Just start shooting.
destroyed.
I'm wearing lots of belts. For no reason at all. I'm trying to care.
Your team has destroyed a turret. Your team has destroyed a turret.
All part of the plan I just made up. Ready to cry.
An ally has been slain. An enemy has been slain. Rampage. Double kill.
Shot other guns.
Has destroyed a turret.
You should see. Let's just behave. Said no one ever. I really need a new gun. But don't tell my other guns.
Enemy has been slain. Shut down. Shut down. Your turret has been destroyed. Your team has destroyed a turret. An enemy has been slain.
Once about blood.
Ally has been slain.
Hold on. I'm about to see something really cool. jinx.
An enemy has been slain.
Ah, come on. What's the worst that could happen?
Shut down. An enemy has been slain.